Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at our top stories. At least 28 people have been injured in Munich after a car was driven into a group of people who were part of a trade union rally. Police say a 24-year-old Afghan refugee who was known to the police was driving the car used in the attack. The crash comes just a day before the start of the Munich Security Conference. Israel has called up military reservists as it prepares to resume its offensive in Gaza. The move comes amid concerns that Hamas will miss a deadline to release more hostages. In a 90-minute conversation with Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin agrees to initiate peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky says he has also spoken with Trump about a lasting, reliable peace. Trump's calls with both sides come as he says Ukraine is unlikely to join NATO. The European Union plans to hit back at US steel and aluminium tariffs. Brussels targets nearly $5 billion of US imports with duties as high as 50%. We first start with some breaking news in Europe as a car has been driven into a crowd in the German city of Munich. Police have detained a suspect while several people are being treated for serious and critical injuries. This apparent attack comes a day before the start of the Munich Security Conference, which will take place just over a kilometre away from where the incident happened.
Chaos in Munich. At least 20 people injured as a car plows into a crowd near the city's central station. A Mini Cooper at the centre of the incident. Was it a tragic mistake or a deliberate attack? The driver, now in police custody, is not considered an ongoing threat, but questions remain. The crash comes just a day before the high-profile Munich Security Conference, with world leaders arriving. Security concerns heighten as Germany prepares for upcoming federal elections amid a series of violent incidents. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Yes, and joining me to discuss this ever-evolving situation, we have my colleague and anchor, Thomas Porteous. Thomas, we know, of course, now that that figure in recent minutes has risen to 28 people. We also know that a suspect has been detained by police. What more can you tell us about the incident and also the person who has been apprehended?
Well, the information that we have is limited, but what we do know is he is a 24-year-old Afghan. We are now unaware where his political ideology lies or if he belongs to any extremist group. What we do know is that a beige Mini Cooper was spotted behind a trade union rally. It seemed like the car was ready to accelerate and in order to overtake the group of people, the car then went directly into the crowd.
Yes, and of course we look at an incident which somewhat mirrors something that happened around the Christmas period also in Germany, the Magdeburg market attack, which also involved a vehicle being rammed into a crowd of people. There are, of course, parallels. We're talking about an incident in the same country. Also, there's a question mark around refugees and also that process. But in terms of the similarities and the sort of repercussions from that attack, where do you think they could go?
Well, this attack comes 10 days before the general election in Germany, an election where immigration is already at the forefront of the Conservative campaign. I mean, this immigration has been coming up, in the televised debate between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his counterpart Friedrich Merz. There is absolutely no doubt that this incident will now cause immigration to be even more of a contentious issue within the German public and play such a huge role in this upcoming election.
Absolutely, and of course we can't take our minds away from the victims and the families of those who have been affected. There are images that have been shared showing a pram as part of the area where the car was driven through. We know also that officials have said that people of all ages have been taken for treatment. But Tom, this attack of course has happened in Munich. We know that there are world leaders and very important people from the geopolitical sphere currently arriving in Munich. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, as we said previously, this attack actually happened around 1.5 kilometers from when this security conference is going to happen. JD Vance is expected to be in attendance. Marco Rubio, JD Vance has actually just landed in Munich. President Zelensky is also expected to be there. So this event was meant to be a diplomatic meeting of all these leaders where people were going to discuss the Ukrainian conflict, but this is certainly going to be at the forefront of people's minds now.
Absolutely, Thomas. Thank you very much for joining us and providing us that insight. As the situation in Munich evolves over the next sort of 12 to 24 hours, we will, of course, bring you those updates. But we now move on, and the negotiations in the Russia-Ukraine war have been successfully launched. US President Donald Trump has held talks with both Russian and Ukrainian leaders. He has also assigned a team to head the negotiations. How are the various stakeholders reacting, and what do these peace talks compromise? Let's find out.
In a fortunate state of affairs, US President Donald Trump said he had calls with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
No, we had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning.
Trump has also ordered top US officials to begin talks on ending the war in Ukraine. In a post on his social media platform, he said Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff would lead the negotiations. Trump said the Russian leader wants the war to end, and they discussed getting a ceasefire in the not-too-distant future. The Kremlin earlier said Putin and Trump had agreed to meet, and Putin had invited Trump to visit Moscow. Trump said their first meeting would probably take place soon in Saudi Arabia. The phone calls came shortly after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made stark comments about the results of the peace deal to Ukraine's military allies in Brussels, which were later reaffirmed by Trump.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
Well, I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that.
On the other hand, NATO chief Mark Rutte said,
it is crucial that whatever comes out of those talks, it is durable. It is enduring. No Minsk III. We cannot have that again. We cannot have Putin again trying to capture a square kilometer, a square mile of Ukraine in the future.
Not just this, the European powers, including Britain, France and Germany, demanded a seat in any future negotiations on the fate of Ukraine. This came as several European ministers met with Ukraine's foreign minister in Paris. Meanwhile, China has applauded the potential peace talks and has floated a proposal to hold a summit between Putin and Trump to help end the Ukraine war. Nevertheless, the much-awaited negotiations have been launched. It is now to be seen how the talks take place, who gets a seat at the table, and where will it land the two warring nations. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll stay in Europe for more of the latest updates from that continent. Austria's Freedom Party has ended attempts to form a coalition with the People's Party after failed negotiations, marking the second collapse since September's general election. FPO leader Herbert Kickl accuses the OVP of power games and refusing to compromise. The two parties struggled over key ministries and trust breakdowns. President Alexander Van der Bellen outlines 4 options for the future: new elections, a minority government, a government of experts, or renewed coalition talks. Anti-mafia police have targeted Sicily's Cosa Nostra mafia to stop it from regrouping and forming a new governing body. Despite embracing modern crimes like drug trafficking and online gambling, they use encrypted phones and collaborate with Ndrangheta while maintaining control over prisons. The crackdown led to arrests of around 150 people, including someone linked to murder. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni vows to continue the fight against the mafia. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth calls for European nations to provide the overwhelming share of funding for Ukraine. He signalled a shift in Washington's position on the war. The US will focus on providing security guarantees while urging NATO allies to increase defence spending. The Western Balkans have made strides in aligning with EU environmental policies. These include improving air quality, renewable energy and wastewater infrastructure. The effects of climate change, such as heat waves and droughts, are getting worse. Experts say greater regional cooperation, improved monitoring and better data collection are crucial for effective policy development. Nestlé is set to report its 2024 results on Thursday, with organic sales growth expected to be 2.1%, the slowest in over 25 years. Sales are forecasted to fall to around 91 billion Swiss francs, partly due to foreign exchange headwinds. Underlying trading operating profit is expected to drop to just over 15 billion Swiss francs and net profit to nearly 11 billion Swiss francs. Shares have fallen nearly 20% in the past year. Tensions are soaring as Israel readies its forces. Hamas halts hostage releases and Trump issues a dire ultimatum. Is the fragile Gaza ceasefire about to unravel? Let's dive in this report.
A volatile standoff threatens to unravel the fragile ceasefire in Gaza as tensions mount over Hamas' delayed hostage release. Israel has begun mobilizing reservists, warning of a renewed offensive if Hamas fails to free hostages by the looming deadline. Efforts to salvage the truce intensify, with Hamas officials engaging in urgent mediation talks in Cairo.
הדאגה שאם המלחמה תתחדש, קודם כל זה יעכב את שחרור החטופים. הם יחזרו במצב הרבה יותר גרוע ממה שהם נמצאים היום, שכבר עכשיו הם במצב די שפל וגרוע. ממש התוודענו לזה בשבת האחרונה, וזה החשש העיקרי.
On the ground, Gazans brace for the worst, with the battered enclave teetering on the brink of another humanitarian catastrophe. Meanwhile, outrage spreads over President Trump's proposal to displace Palestinians and rebuild Gaza as an international resort.
لا نسمع ايش بقول. احنا اللي بنسمعه واللي بنعرفه هذه ارض فلسطينيه عربيه بنقاتل علشانها مدى الحياه حتى قيام الساعه.
In a glimmer of hope, reports suggest a potential breakthrough in talks, with Israel allowing crucial aid to enter Gaza ahead of the Saturday deadline. As the clock ticks down, all eyes remain on the delicate negotiations. Will the truce hold, or is Gaza on the brink of a new war? Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll now look at more updates from across North America. The US Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against New York State officials. The lawsuit includes Governor Kathy Hochul. It alleges failures to enforce federal immigration law. Attorney General Pam Bondi told reporters about the lawsuit on Wednesday. She stated that the lawsuit also names Attorney General Letitia James and the state's Department of Motor Vehicles head Mark Schroeder. NASA's acting administrator Janet Petro said that Elon Musk's government efficiency panel plans to examine the space agency's spending. She noted that hundreds of agency employees have accepted a government buyout proposal. Further, she said that DOGE would conduct a review similar to those performed at other agencies. The review will examine payments and financial expenditures. Billionaire Elon Musk's bid to buy OpenAI has clashed with his lawsuit against the company. OpenAI aims to become a for-profit entity, while Musk argues that its assets should not be used for private gain. The company disclosed this in a letter submitted to a federal court on Wednesday. The family of Sonia Massey, a black woman fatally shot by police in Illinois in July of 2024, has reached a $10 million settlement with Sangamon County officials. She was killed after Sean Grayson, a white sheriff's deputy, fired 3 shots at her. One of the shots struck her in the face during a call for help at her home. Officials in California have disrupted sandbags and prepositioned rescue swimmers. They have also advised residents to have their go bags ready. Authorities are bracing for an atmospheric river that could bring heavy rain, strong winds and flooding. The storm may impact areas that have already been ravaged by wildfires. Meanwhile, Portland has coated its streets with 2,000 gallons of liquid anti-icer. In another move to sour the relations between the two Koreas, the North has ordered to dismantle a border facility. This lies at the Mount Kumgang resort, which hosted families separated after the Korean War. What is the reason behind the move and how has South Korea responded? Let's find out.
According to South Korea, North Korea is dismantling a facility at its Mount Kumgang resort used for hosting meetings between families separated after the Korean War. This is seen as the latest sign of strained tensions between the two Koreas. The Unification Ministry, which handles affairs between the nations, urged to halt the demolition and added that it would consider legal measures over the action.
금강산 이산가족 매매소 철거는 이산가족의 염원을 짓밟는 반인도주의적인 행위이며 우리 국유 재산에 대한 중대한 침해 행위입니다.
The 12-story building was built in 2008 with a budget of $55 billion funded by South Korea and includes an event hall and over 200 guest rooms. The resort, located just beyond the demilitarized zone separating the two countries, was one of two major inter-Korean economic projects, seen as a symbol of rapprochement during decades of hostilities following the 1950-53 Korean War. The last tearful meeting between separated families was held at the venue in August 2018 before North Korea threatened to dismantle the resort the following year. More than 130,000 South Koreans had registered to reunite with their separated families in the north as of December last year, with only 36,941 people still alive, government data showed. North Korea has been escalating its rhetoric against its southern neighbor in recent years, designating South Korea as a hostile state. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll now head to South America for some of the latest updates there. A fire broke out in Rio at a factory making costumes for the Rio Carnival, injuring 21 people in a blow to the famed extravaganza which attracts millions of tourists to the Brazilian city every year. The fire department reported that 21 people were hospitalised after the blaze. Rio de Janeiro's Labour Ministry has announced a probe into the working conditions at the factory. Brazil's Vice President Geraldo Alckmin called for caution and said that Brazil would seek dialogue with the US after President Donald Trump decided to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminium imports. Alckmin said that Brazil was open to dialogue and would reach out to the Trump administration, suggesting that quotas could be a good alternative. Brazil is one of the largest sources of US steel imports. Minerva Foods, a Brazil-based meat major, has submitted a revised proposal to Uruguay's antitrust authority, Coprodec, to require local slaughterhouses owned by meat rival Marfrig Global Foods. Uruguay's competition regulator, Coprodec, had earlier rejected Minerva's bid to purchase the same three slaughterhouses from Marfrig. Minerva is now proposing to purchase the same trio of facilities, but with a pledge to sell one of the sites immediately after the transaction to get the deal passed by Coprodec. China's Ganfeng, which is one of the world's biggest producers of lithium, has begun producing it at its Mariana project in northern Argentina, kicking one of several new lithium projects under its belt. The Mariana plant in Salta represents a $790 million investment and could produce 20,000 metric tons of lithium chloride per year from extraction. The Argentinian president has welcomed mining projects as a way to drive foreign investment in the country. Bolivia is on alert after intense rains killed 24 people and left hundreds without homes, with La Paz being the hardest hit region in the country. The Bolivian Meteorology Service has issued an orange alert to warn of swollen rivers, including the Tipuana, which could further cause floods. Bolivian President Luis Arce hasn't yet commented on the tragedy. A trade war between the United States and the EU is inching closer, with new American tariffs on steel and aluminium set to take effect. EU leaders are racing to negotiate a truce. Will talks succeed, or is retaliation inevitable?
The European Union is racing against time to prevent a full-blown trade war with the United States over looming steel and aluminium tariffs. With just a month left before the tariffs take effect, EU ministers met to discuss their next move, negotiation or retaliation. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has called the tariffs unjustified and warned of firm and proportionate countermeasures. Possible retaliatory tariffs on American goods, such as bourbon and motorcycles, are on the table but remain suspended for now. The EU trade chief has already spoken with US officials, aiming for a diplomatic resolution before the March 12th deadline. While the US is not the EU's biggest metals buyer, steel and aluminium exports to America are worth billions annually. With high stakes on both sides, the next few weeks will determine whether talks will ease tensions or spark another transatlantic trade war. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now for the latest from across the Indo-Pacific region. 5 people have died after an explosion in a Taiwan department store. The blast, which happened in a food court in the city Taichung, has left several people injured. Parts of the exterior of the building have been damaged with scattered fragments on the streets below. Early signs show that it was a gas explosion on the 12th floor of the shopping mall. The Taichung mayor says that vibrations from the blast were felt in the governmental building. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing in northern Afghanistan. An explosion at a bank in the city of Kunduz killed 8 people. The IS propaganda wing say the suicide bomber detonated his explosive vest when Taliban militia members gathered outside the bank to collect their salaries. South Korea's ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol has been back in court for his impeachment hearing. Judges will soon decide whether to formally remove him from office over his short-lived martial law decree. The ousted leader has attended what could be his final hearing. Yoon has remained defiant throughout weeks of hearings, blaming malicious opposition for his martial law bid. Australia has criticised Beijing for their unsafe military conduct. They allege a Chinese fighter jet of dropping flares near an Australian Air Force plane. The Australian aircraft was flying a routine surveillance patrol over the South China Sea when the Chinese Shenyang J-16 strike jet released flares nearby. Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown says he has held discussions with Chinese institutions. Topics discussed include marine science, climate resilience and economic cooperation. During his visit, Brown is also expected to sign a comprehensive strategic partnership with China. Meanwhile, the Cook Islands opposition has filed a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Brown. 2 British nationals have been placed in custody by Iranian authorities due to unspecified security offences. Iranian officials say both unnamed Brits are being held in the central Kerman province. There has been no specific reason given as to why they have been apprehended, while several other European prisoners have been involved in prisoner exchanges with Western governments in recent years. That is all for now, but we'll be back very soon with more of your latest international news.